pulling up a seat in purgatory. Here's your look at the McFarlane toys Spawn with Throne. A government agent, Al Simmons, was killed by his own men. Resurrected from the depths of hell, he returned to Earth as a warrior Spawn, guarding the forgotten alleys of New York City. As he seeks answers about his past, Spawn grapples with the dark forces that returned him to Earth, battling enemies and discovering unlikely allies. As he learns to harness his extraordinary powers, he begins to grasp the full extent of what brought him back, and what left him behind. Designed with ultra articulation for up to 22 moving parts for a full range of posing and play. What do you think is troubling this tormented throne thinker? I don't know either. I'm sure we'll know in a second. What I do know, though, is I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did make this review possible by sending over the Spawn with Throne that we could have a look at in this video. This is going to be the first time I'm going to bring in the tape measure. It's going to be one of two times, as the second time is also going to measure off how tall the throne is once Spawn is sitting on top of it. But for the first time, we're going to bring this in just to show you guys how tall Spawn on his own stands. I'm glad to see actually that they gave us an articulated Spawn, one that you could actually display on his own without the throne if you wish. Although I got to admit, the throne is too cool not to have the figure sitting in it. Anyways, though, Spawn on his own is 6.5 inches in height, and that works out to be a figure that's 17 centimeters tall. Then to compare this Spawn with other Spawn-related figures. Here's what he looks like next to the Mortal Kombat 11 Spawn, a figure we just recently looked at here on this channel. It does look as if they have used some of the mold elements from one figure to the other. I'm recognizing a lot of the same molds being used for the knees, the lower legs, and the tops of the thighs. Possibly more as well. And here's what he also looks like next to the Clown. Don't seem to bring in the Clown nearly enough. Spawn, I think, is a good-sized figure. Short of the fact that the figure doesn't actually have a fully developed cape. We're going to talk more about that in a second. He actually stands in rather nicely for just a comic-looking Spawn, which is really the way I'm going to be displaying the figure anyways. Pulling the camera back just a bit so we can see everything that comes included with Spawn and Throne. Of course, living up to its name, the figure, of course, has to come included with a throne, and the throne does require a little bit of assembly. Don't stress, it's not much at all. The figure also comes included with at least the top collar part of his cape, and the figure also comes included with a display stand. So if you did want to display the figure technically on his own, then at least they've got you covered. They include a circular display stand that we've seen all the times before, and this has, of course, the Spawn logo printed down below here in white, with one singular peg. I'm sure you already know where that's going to be going. On the bottoms of the figure's feet, actually there's two peg holes on the undersides of Spawn's feet, so you can use either one of those. I'd like to see that they actually include these display stands. At one point, I would love to see them actually using the font done in green instead of the white, but still, the fact that they printed that onto the display stand is appreciated. I'm going to put that to the side. Then the figure comes included with a cape, although it's not all the cape that you would expect. Because of this is actually pulled from the pages of the comics, Spawn is sitting down in the throne, so you're really only getting the top of the cape being represented. Technically, there is also a little bit of the cape also coming out from the bottom of the seat. I'm going to go back to that in a second. Though what you do get, though, for the cape is just, again, the collar and the shoulder pieces. It's nicely sculpted, but again, you're only just getting the top of it. I probably would have even spent the extra $5 or whatever more it would have been cost and involved for them to also include a full-size cape too. This is certainly good for displaying him on the throne, but the fact that the figure is also superposable as well, a lot of people, especially to include a display stand too, a lot of people I think would want to also have been able to display this figure with a full-size cape too. Now, for the cape itself, as painted nicely as it is, it's all done here in softer plastic. So, of course, the top of the collar is very soft. The side, shoulders is also soft. You can also see there's a peg right there that's going to attach to the back of the figure's torso. Picking up Spawn right now, the easiest way to do this is actually just taking the top of it and just bringing it down like that. And then from there, you're just going to take the back of the peg. You don't even really necessarily need to attach it. It's more than enough. It's going to stay on Spawn fine. Thank goodness for the chain to do that. But if you wanted to finish off and fully commit to this, you just plug that on the back of his torso. And that's what Spawn looks like with the cape. Again, it's not so much a cape as its top collar and shoulders represent for the cape. I don't know if I would necessarily be displaying this figure standing on a display stand with a cape looking like this. I think I would just choose instead to probably give him a couple of guns and have him almost closer to being like Commando Spawn instead of actually giving him the cape instead. But the cape actually serves a better purpose of having him displaying on the stand or on the actual throne that we'll look at more in a second. Taking this off, at least for the time being, just sort of looks more awkward than anything else. We're going to leave it off, get a closer look at Spawn's face and the rest of the figure's body. Head sculpt is really good on this one, and for the purpose of comparisons, I guess it would be probably better to bring back in the Mortal Kombat 11 Spawn, just to show you that it doesn't seem as if they are using the same head sculpt. One thing you'll notice about the Mortal Kombat 11 Spawn is the fact that he has the very obvious mouth printing, almost as if like it's stretched across his lips. That's something that's been done away with completely when it comes to this version of Spawn. This Spawn still reminds me of like the movie Spawn, kind of the way it's been designed with a more textured looking suit. But again, really nice looking head sculpt. It does have still the peering green eyes outlined nicely in a darker black. Again, you've got the very recognizable printing there on the side on both sides, I should say, of his mask, done here nicely in white. Just again, it's a really, really nice looking Spawn. I just kind of wish still he could have come included with a full cape as well. The colors are nicely done here, handled in white. Although it's not more of a bright white, it seems almost more of a slightly washed out white. I mean, that would be a hard thing to describe, a washed out white, but it's not a super bright white. Does that make any sense? I certainly hope it does. The white stretches all the way around to the back there as well, just above the little skull here that represents the back of his belt. That belt you can follow along with the chains ×2, and that also connects to a front skull, painted just as nicely as the one on the back. It does add some nice additional paint. Now, it seems like they are still using like the rubbery chains, which is fine. I know back in the day when we would have got these Spawn figures, they would have actually had interlocking connecting chains, but it works so much better, I think, now just to have these in rubber. I mean, it's much more pliable. It certainly makes things a lot easier when it comes to moving the figure's legs, for example. It does have a little gauntlet blade there on the one side. I say little as if it's diminishing the size of it. It actually stretches across his entire forearm. I did notice like his shoulders are a bit on the more loose side, but for the purpose of what I'm going to be displaying this figure with on his throne anyways, I'm not going to be putting him in any dynamic poses. But I did notice like his shoulder, at least on this one side, is a bit on the more looser side. He does have the gauntlet there on the top by his bicep and a slightly smaller gauntlet down a little further on this side of his wrist as well. And, of course, all the familiar things you would expect to see from Spawn, the burgundy pockets on the one side, a bigger boot on the one side, a slightly smaller one on the other. The only other thing I would have done differently, I think, to this Spawn is basing it from the original comic art. I think I actually would have not given him a mask face. Instead, I would have given the scar face instead. When we first see him actually on the throne, or at least the image that they're pulling from for this specific figure, he actually doesn't have the mask on. It's just his regular scarred face. It would have been nice actually if they included the scarred face, or they could always down the road release a second version of this guy with actually the skin face instead. For the articulation here on Spawn, it's going to be the same as pretty much the Mortal Kombat 11 Spawn. So his head is on a ball joint, rotates all the way around. You can have the head looking down quite a lot. So if you want brooding Spawn, you can certainly do that. Or you can have him looking up as well, with the head rocked back and forth too. I already mentioned his one shoulder is a little more on the looser side. The shoulder is actually not too bad. Arms rotate all the way around on both the cases. He does have a swivel on his bicep, I should say. Double hinge on the elbow. You got to be careful of these spikes. Not that I've drawn blood, but they are awfully prickly. Hands, of course, rotate also all the way around. You can also hinge them back and forth. Spawn has an upper torso ball joint. He also has a lower torso ball joint that's a little harder to see. It's actually behind the tops of his lower legs, or top of his waist. Figures that does have a leg split. You can see as well that they're still using the ratcheted joints, so at least the legs are going to stay nice and tight. Figures legs move forward and back. There's a nice swivel at the top of the thigh, more so just the way it's attached to the peg. Figure does have a double hinge on the knee, and then he has the articulation here on the feet, back and forth this way, and he also has toe articulation. Now, if I was to move my attention from here to here, it's the same idea. You can just move them back and forth and toe articulation. Although it's a little harder to kind of get in there just by the size of the boot that he has covering over top of it. Nice looking Spawn, I have to say. I'm just going to put the figure down here for 1 second. And then we're going to, of course, draw our attention over here to the throne. I'm going to move the cape over here because that's something we're going to revisit in a second. Now, I did mention, like, the throne does have some assembly required. The only thing that has to be assembled is this top part of the throne. You can see some additional sculpting here. Might actually be good just to show this first before we actually start to put things together. First of all, you got like a really gnarly looking skull here done to the front with just a few little protruding parts of gray, with the majority of it all done in sort of a muddier brown. A little skull there also on the side. It's been on the other side there as well. Like, this is one thing that I really like, first of all, about the throne. First of all, it's pulled from the pages of the comics. This kind of reminds me of like the old classic covers, Spawn figures we used to get back in the day. Granted, these would be a lot more articulated than those figures back in the day. But the neat thing about these, though, is like when you're looking at this, just this alone, there's so much that you can pull in with your eyes. You're going to get a lot more of that, of course, when you eventually take this, and this just slots into the top like that, and you just plug it in place. It's not permanent, so you can remove it at any given point, and that just plugs into place like that. It sort of actually looks like the top of, I don't want to say like a dinosaur. It kind of looks a little bit like the teeth, the fangs of like an old dinosaur. This would be, like, of course, its neck, this kind of makeshift eyeball right here. But then when just to look at this, how much stuff is going on this throne. There's things that you could just spend a lot of time pointing out, noticing right away. Like I see some spinal cords, some skulls. There is a gun. There's a gun just off to the side. There seems to be part of a motorcycle sticking out, at least the handle of that. Little tiny skulls, little tiny spines. Just again, like, there's a lot of cool stuff. I almost even see like little tiny teeth. Are there little teeth somewhere in here as well? It's almost like when you're looking at clouds and you're trying to figure out what they look like. You're almost doing the exact same thing when you're looking at the throne. Just a lot to take in. One thing I'm not sure about, though, is the way they've actually cut in the throne. You can see like this section right here is cut in, and it's different from everything that's around it. Now, I would imagine the reasoning why they did this is for the sake of when they molded this can detach. Now, why it detaches, I don't know. This can be completely removed, but I don't know if it actually has any rhyme or reason as to why it's supposed to come out like this. It's all soft plastic. Again, you can just detach this. And if you look at the inside, like, it's literally just halves, it's pieces of plastic all put together. I don't know why they wouldn't have just molded this as all one piece. And then, of course, just made this as an extra piece that would attach to the top. Why this separates, again, I have no idea. Maybe it was just a little easier for them to actually mold them as all separate parts, and then just put all the pieces together once it came off the assembly line. Other than the fact that, yeah, you do see a very noticeable outline. It's a really neat looking throne. You can see as well, like, there's the part of the continuation of the cape. So the cape you wouldn't see, of course, because he's sitting against the throne. The rest of the cape actually just flows out from the side and snakes its way around the side of the throne. It's all done here in softer plastic. To complete the look, of course, getting Spawn sitting inside the throne, what you're going to want to do is bend the knees. Bend the knees on both the sides. You know how everybody would be sitting inside of a chair, throne or not. Then you're going to go ahead and take the top collar of the cape, bring that down, attach that into the back peg located on the back of his torso, and then from there just sort of just sit him inside the cape. Sit him inside the throne, I should say. And then from there you can just straighten out the legs, get him to the desired look that you want. Now you can either have like the arms onto the sides, the side arms of the throne, or you can also just have him kind of deep in thought. I wonder what Malbolgia is doing right about now. But that looks great. I really like the look of that. Again, like, I'm not sure, though, why. Maybe what I'll do is I'll bring back the box. Not something I was really planning to do. Just want to show you what the Spawn figure looks like in his throne compared to the source material done by Capullo. Now, again, looking at this, you can see that Spawn actually is sporting his skin face, not the mask. So I wonder if maybe down the road at some point, McFarlane's team are planning to re-release the Spawn throne with the skin face. I would rather kind of lean more towards the idea of displaying him with the skin face instead. The other thing that they have left off too is the additional cape that comes out the middle here. You can see it's actually a little bit more here in the original art. But again, that's the source material of what we started with, and this is what the figure finally looks like when he's on display. Now, I did mention, like, this one would have been, I think, at some point released as a classic covers Spawn. It just feels right, I think, being released like that. Now, this figure did get released now with at least a more posable looking Spawn. For me, I would still be inclined to display this guy actually sitting in his chair, because why would they have not included such a detailed chair for me only just to leave it in the packaging? No. I'm going to definitely be wanting to display him in the throne. The only thing I think I would have still done is included maybe a full developed cape. Because, of course, after all, they did include that display stand with Spawn printed down below. They gave you the option of displaying him on his own. It would have also been nice that they could have also included a very same longer cape if you wanted to have Spawn just displayed without his chair. Why hasn't Malbolgia returned my calls anyways? I mean, I've left like 4 messages already on his outdated answer machine. While Spawn does ponder that, one thing I am actually pondering too is that this figure is probably a likely throwback to the originally released Spawn Series 21 alternate reality Spawn 7 on Throne. Not a figure I had the chance to pick up. Notably, that Spawn did go for some crazy stupid money now, so it would be pretty hard now to get one, but that Spawn was also sitting on his throne, and he had also a skull in his hand, something that unfortunately got left off in this release, and I think it would have been a fun throwback to that original figure had they included a skull that he could hold in his hand. Despite not having that, though, this figure does benefit from having the articulation that those earlier Spawns could not possess. This figure does have the means of having him stand on his own, although you're not going to get a fully developed cape. You're just getting the suggestion of a cape. Just more of the shoulders and the top of his collar, while all the rest of the cape you get, I believe, is behind him as he's sitting on his seat. As the figure and his throne spin around, you can see all the more elaborate sculpting that they put into this throne. I'm still not sure why the throne comes in separate parts. Not in the sense that you have to put it together. The only thing you have to put together is the top part of the throne, but the fact it comes apart the way it does leads me to believe that they're probably going to be using at least some of those elements for a future release down the road. And while we're speaking on the topic of future releases, going back to the original Capullo art that this is actually sort of based from, I'm sure at some point they are going to be re-releasing Spawn with Throne, where he actually does have the skin face instead of the mask that he's wearing right now. Though this is still going to be a figure that I'm going to be displaying on his throne, I do at least like the idea that they gave us a superposable Spawn that you could display without his throne, but for how good the throne is, why would you not want to display him sitting on it? A big thank you once again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of Spawn with Throne that we could have a look at in this review. This, by the way, is available right now, so if you guys wanted to get one, certainly for yourself, you should be able to find this now at your local stores and online also. If you enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like? If you're loving the content that you're seeing and certainly want to stick around for more, then hit the subscribe button down below and turn the bell notification on. While we have wrapped up the review right now for Spawn on Throne, there will be more Spawn reviews coming your way in the not so distant future. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.